Joining us now, former governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore. Hey, Governor, the
Good
swamp's
morning,
winning.
John. How are things in Atlanta today?
Never better, but I tell you, lousy weather. Everywhere I go in the U.S., the bad weather seems to follow me. I just can't. Maybe I should go to L.A. or something.
That's cartoon. That's right.
It's like the black cloud over my head. I was in the Middle East for a week in Doha, and the weather was unbelievably gorgeous. 70 degrees at night, 85 during the day. Perfect weather there. Governor,
yes, sir.
Swamponomics. I mean, this budget, should the president have just vetoed this and said the hell with it or what?
Yeah, it depends upon how dramatic the president wants to be and whether he thinks he could get the Congress to do something different. Look, here's the essence of it. I know why he signed it, and he didn't like it, and he said he didn't like it because it's too big. It's $1.3 trillion that's coming out of the economy. That, of course, slows economic growth. And the president's policy has been to boost up economic growth. And so that's why he did tax cuts, for the purpose of actually creating more investment and more growth. And my nonprofit, AmericanOpportunity.org, has always supported tax cuts for economic growth. But the problem is this. The problem is that we are in a very dangerous position in terms of the world situation, the challenge to us militarily, and the fact that we're falling behind to places like the Chinese and the Russians, who are continuing to do sophisticated research. So as a result of that, we simply have to boost up our military. We just have to. And the essence of the problem is the Democrats and the Congress are saying, look, if you're going to add $1 to the defense budget, we want you to add $1 to our welfare programs. And they've always said that, always, always. It's always been that situation. That's always blocked military expansion. But the fact is that we're now in such danger that we just have to do something about it, and the president, I think, signed it under duress.
Okay, Governor, so I get it. I really do. I mean, I really get why he signed it, and that's why I can defend either position. If he vetoed it, I could have defended that easily. Signing it, I get it. If I was there advising him, I think it was a tough decision. He probably could have vetoed it, but I also understand that he got the money for the military, and he can move some of the money around to get extra spending on border security and the wall. The whole process stunk. But he said one thing, and I kind of take him at his word, because he's learning the process. And I think he said, I'm never going to do this again, right? I'm going to do it once. I get it. I didn't understand how this. Now I get it. Now I'm going to get out in front of it. I'm never going to sign this again. I'm going to take him at his word for that. Let's move on to a couple other things. Big.
Before you move on quickly, let me say this is the moment, by the way, when the Virginia senators and members of the House of Representatives need to be providing the leadership to prevent this from happening again. And that includes the other senators and representatives across the country. Okay, let's get out ahead of it. Let's begin to go to work now to make sure the next budget is really adequate and suitable for our needs. And I don't see much of that happening. They just basically threw this thing to the White House and went home.
They're not going to do that. I mean, they've never done that. Rob Whitman has been yelling about that since he's got there, right? They're never going to do that. I mean, this budget ends September 30th. It's already April, right? They're gone now. Then they leave in August to go campaign. There'll be no budget. It'll be the same thing. Continuing resolution, government's going to shut down. You're going to get the same thing. They would have to start working on that like when they get back from Easter, and they're not going to do that because they don't want to, because the money keeps flowing their way. They have no incentive to change. None.
Well, this is
Zero.
the time for the public to stand up, and you're doing that with your radio show.
Well,
so keep going.
It's a thankless job, though, isn't it?
For you and me, yes.
It is for you and me. It's a thankless job. For the people that are, flying around and wherever they go, it's a little bit easier. All right, let's get to Germany. So we got the Germans now. This is unbelievable, Governor. We got the Germans and the German government selling weapons to Iran, right? And Merkel's government wants to they want the Iran deal. They want it to keep going. They don't want the U.S. to get out of it. They don't want the president to delay it. They want him to sign it. And so they're selling weapons to Iran because we have this deal, right? They can do that. They make money off it. And meantime, we're not represented. We don't have an ambassador there. You were in line, one of the choices for ambassador under Tillerson. That didn't happen. The guy that's up for nomination, I can't think of his name offhand, but he can't get nominated. He can't get through the Senate. So, Trump's got all these nominees, non-judicial, government appointment nominees, ambassadors, etc., they can't get through the Senate. They can't even get on the docket. So you're 19 months into the first term, and you got all these positions open, and both sides of the Senate just sit there. What's the deal here?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things, and you're right. I was approached about being the ambassador to Germany, but that at this point didn't come to pass.
It should have.
Let's see what happens. The main thing right now is this: it is imperative that we get ambassadors appointed across the world. Of the 5 big countries, we do have ambassadors in 4 of them. And those would be China, Russia, Great Britain, and Japan. But we don't have the ambassador to Germany. So I think that at some point there's going to have to be a discussion about making sure that we get somebody there and into South Korea and into a number of other places. But a high priority has to be placed on this. If I were the president, I'd make those appointments. I'd make them very obvious the way he has in Germany. And then I would just step up the public pressure. I think we've seen some of that in the last several weeks. But at some point, there just has to be an approval of these key representatives worldwide because the national security depends on it.
Well, they have to do something. I mean, it's very frustrating. And you look at the German situation. I mean, we don't have an ambassador there to argue our position with the German government. I mean, we have...
Well, it is the role of the Senate, of course, under the Constitution to approve these kinds of appointments. And the senators are going on the record about what they think about this appointment and other appointments as well. At the end of the day, there has to be an agreement between the president who appoints and the Senate that approves, and that's the Constitution.
Get them done. Because right now, representing us, and I'm just giving Germany as one example. There's many, many openings all over the globe. But you just take the German situation. The person that's in there now is the acting ambassador. He's a civil servant, spent a career in the foreign service. I understand he's a very nice young man. Good for him. But, I mean, he's not a Trump appointee, so he's not arguing on behalf of the administration. And what I've heard, sources tell me, is he's actually arguing on behalf of the Germans and the Europeans because he doesn't even agree with our position. I mean, it's just, you talk about the deep state. There it is. It's right in front of your nose in Germany. All right, let's get to the Saudis. So just help me understand, why are we now getting involved in the Yemeni civil war? Refueling planes, giving information technology, identifying targets, flying out of our airspace, using our bases, Saudi airplanes bombing a sovereign country, getting involved in that civil war. Why on earth are we involved in this? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, because we're tilting to the Saudis. The Saudis, you got to look at the map and look at where Yemen is, and it's basically on the southern border of Saudi Arabia. In fact, I've read now that the rebels in Yemen have actually been able to shoot missiles into the Saudi capital. So this is a civil war over there that is now threatening the Saudis. The Iranians are in the middle of this. And I think that's the problem that the president is having with the Iranian deal. It may have stopped or slowed up at least the nuclear program in Iran, but it hasn't stopped them from their terrorist activities and their efforts to gain control of the Middle East. And I think that the United States does not think that it's in the national interest of the United States for Iran to control the Middle East. So you have the southern group of Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and Jordan is sitting over there, I think, worried very much about Iran. And then you've got Iran trying to control the northern part of the Middle East, and I think that it's a conflict that's just ongoing. What's the United States' interest in this? I think the United States' interest is to try to create as much stability as possible. I think that the attack on Qatar is not very helpful. You may have a different opinion. You were over there. You saw it with your own eyes. But I think that the goal here is to try to keep America's influence as good as possible and as stable as possible in the region.
Well, the Saudis are the bully of the area, right? Good or bad, like them or not, that's what they are. That's not, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, Governor. They put this blockade, right, on the Qatari people. Saudis, UAE, and also Egypt was part of it, and Bahrain. So they put this blockade because they say the Saudis are cozying up to Tehran. They're supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. They're financing terrorism. They don't like Al Jazeera. So they put this blockade, sea, air, land, these 4 countries in June of 2017. Well, I just went there to check it out. It backfired. The Qatari government, just to sum it up in 30 seconds, they've outmaneuvered the blockade. As a result of it, prices have gone down. Shipping routes have increased from 4 to 22. Their trading partners have gone up 5x. And 9 months later, and they've also become self-sufficient in milk. They're going to be self-sufficient in eggs, self-sufficient in chicken and dairy, all coming on in the next 3 months because they reacted to this. And so for the Qatari consumer, prices are down and choices are up. So it's like it backfired totally on them. And also they're not buying anything from the UAE or the Saudis because there's this blockade. So that thing blew up. There's humanitarian issues. But I don't think the Saudis are going to benefit from that. And the Qatari government, everybody I talked to there, told me that their supporting terrorists was fake news. And the freedoms they've instilled in the country really give me pause, because why would you give this many freedoms out and then be supporting terrorism that's counter to the freedoms? That didn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, that's a great report from the Middle East there, John. The main thing is this: if they're providing more freedoms in Qatar, then that's going to influence their next-door neighbor, the Saudis, who I think now have begun to free up things and give women more rights there to drive and to participate in the civic life of Saudi Arabia. If there's one thing that I want to basically share with your folks on the radio, it's the following things. We cannot lose sight of the fact that we are in a worldwide conflict right now. We are. The Chinese, there's the Korean situation, the Middle East, the Europe that's being pressed on by the Russians. We are in a time of great instability and great change. But it doesn't mean that the change has to be bad. It means that if the United States and the Western powers keep strong and keep their eye on the ball and keep their eye on their values and liberties, that the world can be still a better place in the future. But if the United States steps back and becomes weak, then at that point, I think it's Katie bar the door. We may end up in a real global shooting conflict. The second thing I want to tell your listeners is that economic activity like trade policy and military policy are the same thing. It's a matter of what instruments you're using in order to further the interests of the United States and to further the interests of liberty across the globe. Now, I'm not a nation builder. I'm not a neocon. But I do believe that America has to stand for these principles, and if they do, then people will be drawn to the Western world and to the United States.
What is your reaction to new National Security Council Director John Bolton?
Well, I know him. I'm acquainted with him. I've interacted with him a little bit, but mostly I've been watching John for quite a while. I think we're in a wait-and-see mode. Let's see how he does. The left in this country is trying to make him sort of a detached arbitrator, the National Security Council leader. I don't think that's ever been the case. I think the head of the National Security Council actually does help shape policy. The president has to has to be one of his instruments to shape policy together with the Congress. And let's see how John does. He certainly was very involved, I think, in the Iraq incursion, which I personally don't think was a good thing. But that's done now. That's passed. And I think the question now is how do we deal with the world crisis in the future? Let's wait and see how John does. I think he's not above criticism, but he's a competent and smart man. Let's see how it goes.
On Saturday, Senator Tim Kaine tweeted out an NPR report about a speech that Bolton gave in Russia in 2013 to a pro-gun rights group there in Moscow, and said that he might not get security clearance. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement for a senator of Tim Kaine's stature to say. Ran for vice president on the Foreign Relations Committee. What did you make of that?
I don't know exactly what Senator Kaine's talking about there. I think that if you're going to be in international relations, you're going to have traveled across the world. I don't think there's any evidence that John Bolton has been anything except loyal to the United States. If he gave a gun rights organization in Russia a speech, I don't think that necessarily impugns his integrity as long as it's revealed and we know exactly what the context of it was. It's certainly we want people in Russia to have gun rights. One of the bulwarks of liberty has always been gun rights. That's why I think that these demonstrations are not well thought through in the United States, because gun rights, the Second Amendment has always been a protector of American liberties. Well, those liberties need to be extended into Russia. We all agree with that. So let's wait and see what happened there. But I think that Senator Kane's entitled to look, but I'm not sure what the specific allegation is at this point.
I'm out of time. I want to thank former Governor of Virginia, former presidential candidate Jim Gilmore, for being with us. Always good to get your perspective, Governor. Thank you for being with us.
I try to be as thoughtful and calm as I can, but I'm very grateful for your leadership. I think you're doing a great job.
All right, Governor Gilmore, thank you very much.